You join me in a place that we haven't been to for a very, very long time. And we're in the Japanese village, but we're in the warehouse part. If you guys haven't seen where we make the tin cables, you won't know where we are, right? The only reason we're here is not to do any cable creation. In fact, I think this place looks very messy, and I think we could improve it, but I'm not going to do that in today's video. Last time, we done our immersive engineering, and since then, I have designed the room. I think it looks pretty good. The walls are a little flat, if I'm being completely honest with you. I might move the middle texturing in one block just to maybe create a little bit of depth in this room. I love the ceiling, though. I think it's worked out very well. Putting some light steel beams. But again, we're not doing anything in here. We're doing mechanism today. And I really don't want to do mechanism within the mega base because I have a feeling what we're about to do might cause some radiation. Why might it cause radiation? Well, for the last couple of episodes, we have been trying to get this Nexium emitter. And we have everything but the gravitational modulating unit. Now, everything here is pretty gettable, apart from the ultimate induction providers, which we need 2 of, and the jetpack unit, which we also need 2 of. The modular bases, we only need 1 of, but these require bronze nuggets, which we can get, tin, which we've got. It's the HDPE sheets that we don't have, and they are made in the enrichment chamber with the HDPE pellets, which are then made in the pressurized reaction chamber using liquid, ethane, and oxygen with some substrate. So it looks like we're going to be getting into some machines that could potentially explode if things aren't set up correctly. And so instead of ruining the base, why not ruin the mining dimension instead? So let's get started with mechanism. Okay, so I've gone ahead and made an ultimate enrichment factory and a pressurized reacting factory. These are just ultimate versions of the enrichment chamber and the pressurized reaction chamber. And the first thing that we're going to need to do to get the HDPE pellet is get oxygen and liquid ethene or ethane. Now, to get oxygen, it's fairly simple. We have 2 ways of getting it. Either, again, in the pressurized reaction chamber with ethene and normal water, or we can make the electrolytic separator. I cannot say that word, my gosh. And we can get that pretty simple. So now that we have the separator, we can fill this up with water and we can start generating ourselves some oxygen and even some hydrogen. So with the hydrogen now being maxed out, I'm going to try and put in one of these basic chemical tanks in there that can hold 64 buckets of any gas. So let's see if I can put that in there. And we can see it is getting loads of hydrogen in there, which is good. And we can do the same thing with the oxygen as well. So we could just start throwing a boatload of water in this. In fact, what we can do instead is get a sink. And what we're going to do is we're going to wait until these tanks are now filled. Okay, so they're both filled now, and I made them into ultimate tanks. In fact, they're both not filled. One's about half filled, which is the oxygen. Hydrogen is maxed out. So we can take both of those tanks, and I made a machine for the biofuel because we need to crush down any sort of plant, and it will make us some biofuel. Now, I've already gone ahead and made a load of biofuel off camera. I just thought I'd show you how to do it. You just do it in any sort of crushing factory. It doesn't even have to be the ultimate one. It could be the very, very basic starter one, if you so please. Now, what I have gone ahead and done as well is I know we've got the pressurized reacting factory, but I've also gone ahead and just made the basic version as well, just in case this one, because this one looks kind of confusing. I didn't like it. This one seems a bit more manageable to me. So we need a way of piping our gases in there to make this liquid ethane, which we'll need a condenser for as well at some point. We need to feed that the ethane. There's our condenser. Give it a space in between. Ready with power. so we can feed our liquid ethane straight into this. So we need to feed it water, any kind of water, and hydrogen. Now we've got loads of hydrogen, and we also need to give it some biofuel, which I've already gone ahead and made as well, which will give us the substrate that we need as well. We need to pipe this in. How does one do the piping? That's a pressurized one. Can we make chemical cables or something? Let's try it then. It goes in. I think I just need to configure. That needs to be an output. There we go. Right, that's now filled with hydrogen. Now we just need to give it some water. So we're going to do the same thing here with just some pipes. Now this is going to be very messy, but we're only using it for this. If this turns out that it's safe, I can always add it into a room and we can neaten it up and make it its own place. Now I've gone ahead and already made some biofuel, only a stack, but we'll see what we can do with it. It should be 32 substrate. A substrate, we're getting ethane. Now I want to put the ethane in there, and we're getting liquid ethane. Lovely. Now I want to put that in a tank, and our liquid ethane is now going into this tank, so we can leave that to run for a while. Ideally, I'd like to set this up with automation overnight. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I've sort of automated it and created a little bit of like a massive backup of liquid ethane, because I have a feeling this is going to do some mad numbers overnight. I could be wrong, but you never know. So what we've got going on is obviously we've got a load of poppies. We did have about 10,000 in here, but obviously they're being used up. They're getting crushed down into biofuel. The biofuel is going into here, which I need to put in a stack upgrade just in case. Then they're getting pulled out from this drawer, going straight into the reaction chamber, which is where it's using up all the hydrogen, which we've still got a load of. Should be able to do overnight. It's obviously being fed water. It's making us our substrates, which is getting pulled out by this modular router, because obviously I've run out of faces to pull absolutely anything from. And then that's getting sent into this drawer over here, which also needs some stack upgrades in as well. Obviously, the byproduct of getting the substrate is the ethene or ethane, whatever you want to say, which is then getting sent into this condenser. And then obviously going into liquids, which is going over here, which we already have about 18 buckets worth. So all I've got to do is chunk load this area and leave it to run overnight. Okay, so it's been about 10 hours since we were last on, and we've got 2 full liquid tanks of the liquid ethane. We're going to take one of those over here with this reaction chamber, which I've already got feeding with oxygen that we were making before. So we place the tank down with a liquid pipe coming out of it. We make sure it's pulling out, and we give it an upgrade to feed in so quickly. And all we have to do now is put in the substrate, and we'll get the HDPE pellets. Now we need 3 of these to make 1 sheet, which if we put in the enrichment factory will give us a sheet, and we can use that to make ourselves the module bases. And the only thing we need then is polonium pellets. Now to get the polonium pellets, we're going to need some form of water, which we can get, the fluorite dust, which again we can get, and we need the polonium. Now this is where things could get dicey and things could start exploding, because this is radioactive. So first of all, we're going to need a solar neutron activator, but we actually need some nuclear waste, which you can get through bees, but obviously we don't have the bee to do that. So it looks like we're going to have to go into fission reactors. which is where things could get a little bit dangerous, and something I've never really messed with before. So to even get started in reactors, we're going to need sulfur trioxide, which we can get from the chemical infuser if we infuse oxygen and sulfur dioxide. To get sulfur dioxide, we then need the chemical oxidizer with just some form of sulfur, which we have. We can set that up right now. So with feeding this thing sulfur, we'll get sulfur dioxide. We then want to feed this sulfur dioxide into a chemical infuser with oxygen. So now that we're getting sulfur dioxide, we can pump it straight into this chemical infuser. Excuse the piping, for some reason it won't let me output it from over here, which is really annoying. So now we need to feed this thing some oxygen. Now, we should be done with the oxygen over here for a bit. We just take the tank, feed it some oxygen, and we'll get sulfur trioxide. Now, this is something I want to put into a thing called a ultimate max chemical tank, which is just a chemical tank, but like 3 times as big. So I'm going to have to let this fill up a little bit before we can start using it anywhere else. So we ended up getting rid of the tank in the end, and as you can see, we're still creating sulfur trioxide. Now, this has changed a little bit since you guys last saw it, because I thought maybe this would be a little bit confusing as I'm trying to do it and explain it at the same time, but now I have my head wrapped around it a little bit. Maybe I can explain it a little bit better. So, obviously we've got the trioxide being made. You saw that before. That's then getting straight up piped into this chemical infuser, which is also getting water vapor, and we're getting water vapor from this sink piping into this rotary condensator, which is switched over to decondensating. That's a big word. Didn't know that was actually a word. Which is obviously breaking down this water into water vapor, sending it into the chemical infuser. That is then making us our sulfuric acid. Now this is one component for the hydrofluoric acid. Now, how are we getting hydrofluoric acid? Well, the sulfuric acid is being fed in here with some fluorite, which I've got in a barrel up here, which is always automatically going to be feeding into it. That then gives us our sulfuric acid, which then goes into this chemical infuser. And that is one part for the uranium hexafluoride that we need for the fissile fuel. Now, the only thing we actually need now is the uranium oxide. So let's go set that up. And one of the items that we're going to need to start getting the uranium oxide is yellow cake uranium, which we can get in an enrichment chamber with some uranium ingots, which I have an enrichment chamber here, which I've put a barrel on top of the enrichment chamber with some uranium in, and now we're getting our yellow cake uranium. Now, do I really want to touch this? Is this going to start to kill me if I touch it? No. That's all good then. We then need to put the yellow cake uranium into the chemical oxidizer to then get uranium oxide. So now that we have it piped in, the yellow cake uranium is going there. We need to make sure we give this thing some power so it constantly runs, and we are now getting uranium oxide. And with this uranium oxide, we can now straight up pipe it into this chemical infuser, and we should be getting the uranium hexafluoride. And as you can see, our uranium oxide is being pumped in, and our uranium hexafluoride is being created. So now what's left to do is pump that thing into this isotopic centrifuge. And with this fissile fuel, I do actually want to keep this in a tank, but I need to make sure that it's running overnight and making sure that none of this runs out, which I think will run out of sulfur first. So, unfortunately, we can't put this in any sort of tank. I've tried with the chemical tanks, fluid tanks, even with pipes. normal pipes. It doesn't want any of it. The next step in this is actually the start of the reactor. Now, this reactor is what actually can explode, and a few things can happen with it. One, it could go into meltdown, which is obviously really bad, because if we're not cooling the thing, it will then literally explode. The other thing that can happen if we don't empty it as often is leaks, and that is just like a spread of radiation. Now, there are things in place that we can do to sort of shut it off when it detects a leak. But first of all, I want to get the thing going. And the smallest one that we can make is a 3x3x4. And I might end up making this a little bit bigger. There we go. We know it's working because of the way it just done like a redstone effect. Now, I'm not going to pipe anything into this just yet because I really don't want this thing running until we have our fail safes in. So, of course, what we want to do is we need to put in water to this. So we're going to need a sink. Now, there are two ways that we can use cooling for this. One is with sodium, which we cannot and have not got yet. And two is obviously water. Now, the only problem with using water is it has a byproduct of creating steam, which obviously no one wants, so we might have to just throw that out. But with the coolant sorted, it's on to a little bit of like fail-safe work. And the way we can do that is very simple. What we want to do is use a daylight sensor. Now, of course, I want to set the fission reactor logic adapter to activation. That means when it's active, it needs a redstone signal to be activated to power on. And if it hasn't got a redstone signal, it will then shut itself off automatically. Now, the reason we do this is because, obviously, to make polonium, it's a solar neutron activator. It uses solar power to make the polonium liquid, which is what we need. So to stop it from bottlenecking, we switch the reactor logic adapter to activation, and we use a daylight detector and some redstone dust just to turn it off as and when it goes day or night. So with those fail safes in, and we're getting coolant, now we can put in a bit more of a heavier fail safe, but obviously we're only using a very small reactor at the minute. We should be able to pipe up the fissile fuel from here, send it into here, and it should hopefully not explode. Oh, I'm so scared. Right, what I want to do as well is set up a little trash can. There we go. So now we've got it piping, so it only pulls out. We set it to gas, which is the green pipe, and we have got it set so it only pulls out the steam from Mechanism and sends it into this trash can. And then hopefully everything else should be okay to go. This thing should be active because it's now daytime, which it is. And we'll get nuclear waste, which then needs to be piped into some of these radioactive waste barrels. So there's only one thing to do, and that's go with it. And I ain't liking it at all. Really not liking that. Oh, it scares me. Okay, at least that's stable at 374. How do I pipe the nuclear waste out? Okay, so I've managed to sort the issue with it not pulling out any of the liquids. It's because you need to actually set the ports to be either coolant or waste. And the way you do that is with the configurator. So I've got this one pulling out steam. That goes straight into there. This one pulls out any radioactive waste and puts it inside of these barrels. Now, if we really... It is going to decay over time, but what we want is for it to come out the bottom as well and go into the solar neutron activator, which we can then pull out the polonium and put it into a tank for later storage, which is why I've got a ultimate max tank at the ready. So one thing I want to do is connect this up. So there we go. We have some nuclear waste in there. It is pulling out from these, which is good. You should be able to hook this back up to power. Obviously, it's not going to kick in right away because it is night time. So let's see if this will work. Hopefully it will. In fact, I've had a change of mind. I'm not going to put it in this tank. I am going to make it straight into the polonium pellets. Okay, so I've actually gone ahead and got rid of the tank completely, and this is going to make us the whole polonium pellet altogether. So what we got going on here from here, I've not tested this yet because I don't want to have this reactor on at the minute until I'm fully confident that this thing is working, and I don't really like having this running if I don't need to. So there's no point in this running and this making the polonium liquid until I'm fully ready and I think I've got everything done. So what I've got going on is we've got some fluorite, which is going to be pumped into this crusher. I've not done it yet, but it will be, which will then give us fluorite dust, and then that'll get sent into this pressurized reaction chamber. Of course, this is getting pumped with nuclear waste, which will then turn into the polonium, and then that gets pumped into here. We've already got the water being pumped in. This hopefully will pull out the spent nuclear waste. That's the one thing I'm not too sure on, whether that will do its thing or not. The next thing that happens is once the polonium pellets have been made, they get put into this drawer here. So let's start crushing some fluorite, and we'll start feeding some of it into there. And before we activate this, kind of want to make the hazmat suit just in case it goes wrong. And that means we will not be able to fly, unfortunately. But at least then I won't die. There we go. It's on. We're not getting any backup of anything, which is great. This is getting nuclear waste, which again is great. And this is getting the polonium, which is also brilliant. However, there's not much in there at the minute to be making any pellets. Just need to make sure that I keep an eye on basically the heat coolant tank and the waste coolant tank and maybe some of these stats here. Now, really, we're not even close to exploding here. It's just in case something overrides or something backs up and it all goes wrong. That's why I've got these two waste barrels here. So if this ever fills up for whatever reason, I don't think it ever will, but if it does for whatever reason, we have like 1,000 buckets worth of backup in these waste barrels. And then of course, if this thing ever does fill up with polonium, then we're kind of screwed. It shouldn't do, but hopefully it doesn't. I don't really want to hit anything with the time one, so I'll just be back with you once we can make one of our polonium pellets. So we had an issue. Now I did clock onto the issue like 3 minutes before it happened. Basically what happened was this sink stopped feeding, or wasn't quick enough at feeding the reactor with fluids. So now it exploded, which I thought would happen. Luckily nothing else got damaged, and as you can see over here, we were only 559 millibuckets in. Didn't even get to make one. So it looks like we've got to repair this thing and see what happens again. The thing that could have let me down there was genuinely this pipe. Luckily, wearing my hazmat stuff, otherwise I'd be dead right now. Right, let's try and repair this thing. Right, the one thing it does say is to actually try and use integrated dynamics, because it can do like 2 billion millibuckets of water every tick, which would actually be very good. But I don't know how that's going to work. I don't think I have anything to do with integrated dynamics. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and used integrated dynamics. Now, how does this work if you've never used it before? Well, you want a fluid importer on the sink, and you want to make sure it's on import all fluids. Now, what we can do is we can click this little plus button here to change the properties, which is where we want to go to fluid transfer rate. Now, it can do like 2 billion, so I just added 2 and then 1 bunch of zeros. I don't know how many zeros that is. All I know is this thing is not going down in fluids. And we also need to make sure that we have a fluid interface on the reactor port as well, so that it can actually accept the fluid. And then you just connect it together with a logic cable. Hopefully this doesn't explode again, is what I'm saying. So hopefully this radioactiveness will just die down on its own. I don't know how long it takes. So the next thing we're going to do while this is doing its thing is make the lithium that is required for our induction providers. Now, to get lithium, a little bit awkward because we actually need a thermal evaporation controller for the brine, but then we also need that again for the water to turn into brine. So let's go make a thermal evaporation controller. So to make the thermo evaporator thing, we need a 4x4. Then want to put the controller, a valve, and another valve there. We're going to need another one of those. Put it right next to it. And then we can just infill all of that. We then need to put 2 blocks on each side, making sure we leave the corners exposed, because we need to put in advanced solar panels. Yes, and we can see now it's getting up to temperature. So we need to make brine in this little thing. We need a sink. Okay, this thing might end up overheating, so we need to give it water and quick. Now, I don't know if this is going to be very good. And we've got brine. And now we need to take that brine out and put it into another thermo evaporation plant. I might make another one for that, because I think that would be beneficial. Now I want to pull out the brine and send it into here, and then we'll get liquid lithium. There we go, we're getting liquid lithium. Now we want to pull out that liquid lithium and put it into a decondensating machine. There we go. And now we need to turn that lithium into its powdered form, which we do within the chemical crystallizer. Okay, and that is lithium all set up as well. Perfect. And that's going straight into our system as well. So, just like that, we have over 108 lithium. Beautiful. The only thing we're waiting on at the minute is the pellets. But that could take some time. Okay, so we finally have our very first pellet. Yes! And do you know what that means? From our rewards, we get ourselves the extra 3 that we need, so we don't have to wait for so long while this thing does its thing. I've gone ahead and made patterns for all the ultimate induction providers. I've gone ahead and made 2 of those as well. So the only thing now that we are waiting on is this thing. But we also need refined glowstone, which we haven't got yet. So we can get that from the osmium compressor. We have glowstone. And we have an osmium compressor somewhere around here in our many, many, many machines. And there we go. We have ourselves some refined glowstone. Boom. Boom. Gravitational modulating unit. Yes. And then Nexium emitter. Boom. There's our next part of the Ultramodium star. Lovely. And just in time, the radiation has gone from this place. Oh, that's beautiful. But that's going to do us for today's episode. It's been a very, very long one. I can only apologise about that. But thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed it, make sure to smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you are new. And I will see you all again very, very soon. Goodbye.